My name's Kevin Collins with Home Theater Forum,
Dennis Chern with Martin Logan.
and we're here at CEDIA 2011, and we're hoping you can walk us through some of the new features that you have for Martin Logan.
Okay, well here in our sound room, we have our new Montis loudspeaker, and this is towards the top end of our range. This uses our famous electrostatic curvilinear panel, and it's a hybrid in that it makes a fabulous woofer, and this is a powered woofer. And some of the new features of this, and of course we've been doing this 30 years and have evolved this type of product, is the latest generation of a 24-bit digital crossover to get a very seamless match between the electrostatic dipolar sound and the powered woofer. There's a 200-watt amplifier in there. Martin Logan, I think in our near 30 years, is most famous for some of our breakthroughs in electrostatic technology. The sound quality is superb because of a lot of features, such as the film that's sandwiched in these perforated panels is very fast and accurate. There's no crossover, so you have a purity of sound. The film is uniformly driven, so there's no distortion, and we have an ideal dispersion pattern that goes into the room where the listeners are, but not on the floor and the ceiling and the sidewalls. So you kind of take a room out of an equation. When you put it all together, you got a superb music lover, home theater lover loudspeaker.
Now, if you're having a home theater, there's always the issue on, if you're the screen and the placement of the speakers. If you were having a transparent screen, micro-perf screen, and you had it in front far enough, is this something that these speakers could still go behind that, or is that something you wouldn't recommend at all?
That's a good question. I would say no more or no less than a cone or a horn speaker. They certainly could go behind it. And just like any great speaker manufacturer whose ambition was quality, they probably prefer for the ideal sound, even with the perf speaker, to be just adjacent to it rather than behind it. But it's a good question in that people assume because we're a little better sounding than those traditional speakers, we might suffer more behind the screen, but we would suffer no more or no less.
Okay, thanks. Is there any placement guidelines that you have with this type of speaker versus, there's a lot of other speakers, you need to leave it off and have it room for the back for, the cancellation? Also
a good question. Again, I would probably start with no more or less than a typical properly designed good box speaker. And what that means is if you're the kind of user who wants to get the very best out of these speakers and you have no compromises design-wise, yeah, you would like to bring them out 2 or 3 feet from a wall at least, and maybe even as much as 4 feet like there are approximately here, a little bit away from side objects. But if you have some design restraints, you can get a huge percentage of the performance just a little bit off the wall and just towed in a little bit. So the theories and the basis of how you would set up a box speaker would be surprisingly the same as this.
Okay, great. My first experience with Martin Logan's was way back in the 90s when...
You say way back, you're a young guy.
Yeah.
To me, that just seems like yesterday.
Other people, though, it might be way back. But in the 90s, CES, and there was The Show. And you guys were always at The Show, and that was my first experience, because of those little double stack hotel rooms, wait in the long line. What has transpired in the technology from Martin Logan from when I first had my first incredible experience with him, listening to him, to what we have in the latest line?
Another good question. It's been a steady evolution. The principles that we're working with here, many of the Martin Logan breakthroughs from the previous 100 years of electrostatic design, and it is a mature technology in that sense, were pretty radical. Patenting of the curve, using then space-age materials to solve a lot of the early electrostatic problems. From these early 90 days you're talking about, over the last, am I going to have to say 20 years, it's been a steady attention to improvements, such as the way we coat the film has improved. The actual perf pattern in the metal has improved. Huge improvements in our engineer Joe Voitko's work in crossover technology. As computer modeling has come on, he's been able to get finer and finer with that that precious match between the panel and the woofer. So it's been an incremental advance, but it's startling when you take, and we do keep products from those periods, and we recently pulled something from the early 90s. We have a new $2,200 hybrid stat panel speaker outside, and we compared it to one from the early 90s. Within $100 of the same price point, and that's 20 years ago, and the new one just blows it away sonically. It was, the 90s one was good in its time. So all these little improvements, technical and parts and research improvements, have made a substantial improvement in the overall sound, where the concept is somewhat the same.
So how much are the new line?
Well, this Montis in some nice finishes starts at about it starts at 10,000 a pair. We have, and then we have some fun finishes, some beautiful gloss. I don't know if the camera will show that. That are upcharges. We have some interesting things like zebra wood and teak and whatnot. We're bringing teak back. Hey, Scandinavia. We have a more ambitious model of this called the Summit X, which has double the amount of woofers and power. That's at about 14,000. Our highest price speaker now is called the CLX, which is that's a more breakthrough, more advanced product with some startling improvements in like electrostatic base panel and its physicality and whatnot. And so that's in about the 25 grand. Then you work your way down from this. You go down to about a $6,700 version of this, little smaller panel, little lesser woofer. You go to about a $5,000 version, down to a $2,200 version. And these are all just the stereo pairs of the hybrid electrostatics.
Now I noticed when I walked into the room that there was these electrostatics that are on the wall. How does that work in if you're like a home theater person and you want to merge? You know,
this is now called the EFX, and it's on a hinge. It's a very simple, barely 6 inches or so off of the wall. We've had generations of this in the past. This is the newest iteration, and this gives the purist Martin Logan electrostatic music lover who wants to do theater effects channels. It could be multi-channel music, it could be sides, rears, however large. It could be multiples of these, and you can even flip them the other way. What it gives you is a baby hybrid. It goes reasonably deep in the bass, and of course at that point you're doing your bass management and transitioning from the low end to this to your wooferage in the room. So this is simply just our latest generation of the classic, again, hybrid. Got a 6.5-inch woofer, fabulous little stat panel. It gives you a pure electrostatic multi-channel experience.
So this might be sacrilege, but if you need a center channel. So you talked about that you could flip this upside down if you wanted to.
We haven't seen our center channels yet.
Oh, okay.
Good question again. We didn't bring them here. Of course, they're known amongst the world of Martin Logan music lovers and theater lovers. We've evolved from many generations of our products a fabulous offering in center channel. Combinations of smaller and larger depending on the screen and room size, hybrid electrostatic horizontal mounted adjustable centers, which use stat panels and smaller woofers and smaller tweeters for dispersion. And so they give the purist the full Martin Logan sound. They're tuned for the left and rights, and they're functional for either big projection systems or small LCD and plasma panel systems. Then as you go finally lower into the price points, we've begun to work with a folded motion tweeter, which is, we talk about it as the cousin to the junior relative to the electrostat, in that it's like the electrostat. It's a fast film driver, so it's quicker and more natural sounding than a dome or cone tweeter, and it's also a larger area, but it's folded down. You can see it on our website, and that allows us to work in more modest price ranges and in a smaller package. And if one's budget and size are such that they still want electrostatics for fronts, let's say, but they need something more compact and more modest price, they can use the fold-in motion options in the centers to get darn close to the timbre match that's desirable for the front three, but the budget and size is there.
Now, does the EFX, is it just this size, or is
just
there
one product?
Okay, so you know, I'd have these as my rears,
Right.
and I could theoretically have them as my fronts
You
too,
could.
right?
You could. We've done some nice systems where design criteria or size calls for a someone's in an apartment, they love electrostatics, they've got a limited size, they want stuff off the floor. It's a great sound. You put, you know, left, right, rears, little center, our smaller electrostatic center, and you're good to go with a nice sub. And of course, our subs are pretty legendary out there because of our decades of understanding how a woofer works and its limitations. So we have a really good subline that matches very well with anybody's speakers. We sell thousands of those that go with other people's speakers, but it's a really good match for Martin Logan.
So is there, if you were going to have these as left-rights in the front, would you mount them on the back wall, or would you mount them on the side wall? It looks like you
kind of answered if they're fronts, they're fronts. So I'd mount them. You know, let's see, are you envisioning with a home theater or just a stereo?
Yeah, home theater, because I see how it turns.
Well, that's to give you some control of the sides. But picture this was the left speaker, and where you're standing was the TV. I'll use that old 20th century term. You would just simply this is just quick mount to a cardboard wall, but they would stick straight out, and they would be. Our engineers tuned them to this distance from the wall. And they would be a great left and right speaker. They're a little over I think it's 3,000 a pair.
Right.
And I don't know what you could get that sounds better other than our floor standing version, but this is a compromise to that degree. We don't consider this a full range speaker. It doesn't quite have the final octave of bass, so I would always want to see these with a sub.
Right.
And what actually shows you what's a good value is our little, what we call our Electromotion, which is a floor standing version with a slightly bigger panel and a full bore woofer, and that's a full range speaker. That's a value. This costs a little more to make these in the size and the complexity that they are as an effects channel.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.
It was nice meeting you.
All righty.